first actually webinar we've run on level 3 this year, and it's useful now. It's actually quite a useful point to reflect on the program, since we've got quite a lot of people coming who've going to be going through the process over the last couple of years. So I'm going to start at the beginning. For those who don't know me, I'm John Homewood. I've been working with and for the LCS for and also Lean Enterprise Research Centre in Cardiff for 12 years now, part-time and full-time. So, and more critically for this session, I've been supervising level 3 candidates since 2011, so 12 years pretty much. So I've got a wealth of it. I am the expert, if you like, in this field. Today's agenda will essentially really to give you a whistle-stop tour of the level 3 program and its components and some rationale behind it, and also the mechanisms for joining it or coming to talk to us about further things. Just to remind you where the LCS came from, it was developed from within the Lean Enterprise Research Centre within Cardiff University. During the 2000s, actually, there were a few test cases. I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of our first customers was actually Barclays, and they still are a customer. It was very much sitting within the body of the sort of a research centre organisation, and it span out in 2014. Such that we had sufficient independence to develop the products and develop the relationships with sufficient independence from the university itself. It's still a licensed product of the university, so very much heavy contacts there, and the governance board sits within the university. Now, the Lean Competency System, again, for those of you who are unaware, essentially marries primarily accreditation, where we accredit organisations to award certificates on their own on our behalf in the area of lean competency improvement science, let's call it, continuous improvement, whatever the term might be used within the organisation. And to a certain extent, we issue our own certificates, particularly at higher levels. So if we remind ourselves of the levels, you've got your large awareness group down here at level 1, going up to 1C, which where you start getting emerging practitioners or part-time practitioners, into level 2, where you start to get people developing their own experience and maybe even early career within the improvement field. And then where we're going to concentrate today is, if you like, the more strategic level, the people with quite a significant level of experience, a broad range of experience, and or the depth of experience, depending on their own personal story. And typically those candidates who come to us as level 3 in the level 3 area are able to exhibit themselves as if you like, lean leaders. And the only distinguishing characteristics between level 3 and level 3B is essentially the breadth, the coverage, and the seniority to a certain extent, perhaps within the organisation or within their own experience, within the portfolio of experience which is developed through the programme. So I'm just going to show you a couple of other things I've got live now, so that I can see the screen properly. And as I say, that's the area that we're going to concentrate on today. It's very much this area is primarily run by us within the LCS, and or a couple of consultancies also have accreditation to administer level 3 candidates. And we'll come on to that a bit later towards the end. So the purpose of the programme, why do level 3? Well, it's it spotted a gap, if you like, a gap in the market, a gap in the needs of very experienced leading practitioners, leading improvement practitioners. Perhaps people have been doing things for many, many years, but have never had anything concrete or explicit to show for it, apart from their, if you like, their CV. And very much the level 3 element was developed to demonstrate that, to be portfolio, to demonstrate, be able to demonstrate that experience and depth of knowledge for those particular group. And what emerged, actually, if you think of those first two as the impetus for the level 3, what emerged was that third category, which is was invigorating people's personal development through the process of putting material together, but also that what emerged was a critical reflection element, and it's proved very powerful for many people. And I'll come on to a couple of examples of that later. Through that, looking back at your own career and looking back at some study and research. But I think it's important to note right at the start, its primary focus is on practice. It's an experiential certification, experiential qualification. Its focus is on practice, experience, and reflection. It shouldn't be called an academic qualification, although it's a spin out from the university. It's certainly not. You wouldn't say I'm a graduate qualified from the university, which is tempting sometimes for people. However, it is governed. There is a governance process as well from within the university. Okay, so I've mentioned a couple of examples earlier. The typical experience profile of a level 3 candidate, not unreasonably actually, it's probably at least 10 years in the area, in the field, if not full-time, certainly significant part of their working role. And for example, there might be some operational directors who, for some what become obvious reasons, have spent a lot of their time working on improvement and within the field of improvement. And so a large, perhaps some chunk of that 10 years might involve another job, but had a significant element of that. And essentially, the reason for that is to get to this level, you generally have to have quite a sort of level of maturity, if you like, and develop that level of experience, trying, testing, practicing, working with others. But you've got to a level where you're leading others, you're mentoring others. You might be seen within the company, if you like, as a guru to a certain extent. And I think probably the most important thing is that you've got, in addition to the practice and the practical side of things, you've got well-developed leadership competencies. You can work with people, and that will emerge during the case study. That you've got to a position where you are dealing in strategic development, either within the company or within the range of organisations that you've been working with, and that's coupled with that, and over that time you've developed a broad knowledge of lean thinking, operational excellence, continuous improvement, whatever we like to call it. Let's call it improvement science as a headliner. And in addition to that, through application, leading, training others, educating others, or indeed research. So I suppose if there were no other slides that I was going to represent in this, it would be this one. Essentially, this shows you the components of the program and some of the main criteria. It is, as I say, it's an experiential reflection on your own development, and it's quite an involved piece of work. So it can take up to 12 months. It's worth setting out your aims to sort of complete in around 9 months, but usually typically takes up to 12 months, maybe, and for some even more, because you've got day jobs, because you've got important roles to play, and fitting it in. Your good intentions right at the start can lead to can be scuppered by corporate activity that you perhaps hadn't seen or planned for. So we're aware of that. So essentially, that's why more often than not, candidates take a good 12 months to get through the programme. You can come in as a group, within a group. We've had them within organisations, so groups of people from the same organisation working together. We've got a couple at the moment. Or come in individually, and just look at your own portfolio. And we also, if we have enough people starting at the same time, we can work together as a cohort, as a group, a disparate group, if you like, of people with different backgrounds, and that's proved very helpful to some. And the first, if you like, the evidence portfolio you put together over that time is first the application, essentially a lean CV. That's followed by 3 case studies, an assignment. Let's call it more of an academic piece, but it's also an opportunity to reflect your own personal views on the practice generally, or within the organisation that you're working on. And that's all rounded up with a panel presentation at the end, which summarises a lot of what you've gone through so far, and perhaps looks to the future as well. Gives you an opportunity to showcase your where you want to go in the future. So if you bear this one in mind, essentially that's the contents. We'll look at the process in a little bit more detail. Just a thought for you all. What sort of the reason that what are the reasons that you've come to this presentation together? What's attracted you to what you've seen so far, or the qualification that you've seen online? Any thoughts? Well, if not, they're not untypically. It's, if you like, a recognition. It provides a recognition for yourself, a justification, if you like, to a certain extent, on a crystallization of what you've done over many years that may not have been recognised. Sometimes it's an opportunity to boost your own personal profile, your internal credibility. Some people have used it as an opportunity to showcase themselves or the department or the work that they've been undertaking within an organisation, and use that panel presentation at the end as that sort of final showcase to the powers that be within the organisation. And indeed, sometimes, depending on where you are, you might be a consultant, to enhance your credibility, your standing with customers or potential customers. So it's to a certain extent an element of marketing there. And there are many other reasons, but that's perhaps where people start. Let's look at the overall process then. It's pretty much sequential. You can start things a little bit early, but essentially the process starts off with that application approval. It's essentially putting your lean CV together. You start off with a kickoff session. We go through planning phase, get those 3 case studies together. Then you do your assignment, which is informed by the case studies, and finish off the presentation. And all of which is mentored and coached, and given as much feedback as you think you need, but not untypically. We try to keep the momentum going. I think the important thing is often you've got lots of other pressures on you, whether they're corporate or personal. Keeping the momentum going is quite a major challenge for the overall process, and part of that is involved in it's supported by the coaching and feedback given by your partner within the organisation. So just to run a little bit more on the application. So the application itself is essentially putting your lean CV together. You may want to have one already, but essentially it sort of majors on the lean elements, and it gives us a point of reference to talk about where you might want to develop case material for the future. And it's also, to a certain extent, it's a bit of the gatekeeping exercise. You probably won't get to that stage until you think you're capable of going through the process, but it's also an opportunity for us to say, you tick all the boxes. That makes sense. Let's move forward. We follow that with a kickoff session, which goes through a lot more detail than we're going to go into today about the processes and the expectations and some of the support material. And that's rounded off. You finish that process by starting to plan over that period of time, trying to fit it into the timetable that you expect for following 12 months or so. And also some case proposals. So we start looking at cases already at that stage. Your thoughts on where you want to take that. No, again, case proposals can actually, you can put as many in as you like, and we can bring 3 together that make sense. Then we get into the cases proper, and start developing not only the cases themselves, but also the method by which you put the cases together. Because often, for many people, this is the first opportunity to put, or first time they put some sort of, let's call it narrative document together for quite some time. Many of you will have presented lots of things, but generally they're prompted by bullet points. As a narrative, that doesn't really work. So if you feel like you're putting bullet points together and then filling in the gaps with a story, your own personal story. And the case one generally takes the longest, and essentially you're getting to grips with putting case material together, but it's also an initial focus and develops your own personal style for that and for subsequent cases and material. The cases themselves, or let's view them as a whole, 3 cases together. They will typically involve lean implementation projects. They may outline sort of a sequence of events, a sequence of projects which fit together at that time in your personal development or your improvement development. They work towards your current position or your current experience level, if you like, at a strategic how you developed and outline how you developed to the level that you're at the moment. And so therefore major not just on what you've done, what the organisation did, but also on illustrating elements of your own personal development. It's very much first person type activity. And how you develop the leadership, an opportunity to reflect on how your leadership style developed and your relationships with people. And I think probably an important thing to stress here, and I think here is it's about illustrating, it's about showing your development and the lessons that you learned. The temptation is for many at this point to sort of say, well, we did a body of work, it was good, here are our conclusions. It's actually, it's all about you, essentially. So that it's turning what we're typically used to about talking about the team, about we, into a story, a narrative about your own interaction with a number of projects or particular program that you're involved in or were leading at the time. Now, again, something we didn't really start off doing. Essentially, you could have put together 3 fairly disparate case studies which all have met the criteria. But what's developed is actually an approach, and it's very powerful. It's emerged as a very powerful technique. Is essentially putting the 3 case studies together as a story. So, case 1, for example, might look at your early experiences, the opportunities, what sparked you to move into the improvement field. May explore your just initial motivations. So therefore, it may not necessarily be a fairly particularly strategic element or where you've had particularly strategic responsibilities, but it's an opportunity to go back and reflect on the reasons, the rationale, and the methods and techniques that brought you into the field. And as I've mentioned, it also gives an opportunity to develop a case study writing technique. And then bearing that first case study in mind, where it's fairly early days reflection, and often for most people, you're going back quite a long way. So you've got to plumb the depth of your experience as well on your memory. We use case study 2 as building upon that experience. It could be immediately after that first case study, or it could be a few years down the line where you've develop your thoughts, if you like, develop your maturity, your leadership maturity, and your understanding of improvement practice and the interactions, primarily interactions, but also the behaviours of others, your observations of others' behaviour in the context of an improvement framework. And then case study 3 generally is something a bit more recent. It could be something you're currently involved in. We have a number of candidates who sort of work on that to actually use it to their advantage, to a sense, because it gives them the permission, the excuse to step out of their current context and sort of and take a more take a heli view, if you like, of their what they're undertaking at the time, or indeed it might be something where you might want to look towards the future. So you might be in the process of developing something and looking in that direction. But as I say, I think that putting the 3 case studies together as a development story has proved quite a powerful approach. And in all of that, you've got and what has emerged is that key element of critical reflection, both within the context, within the narrative, and also explicitly outside the narrative as well. The cases themselves are fairly straightforward, and you've got you introduce the reader to the context, the introduction, what your roles, what the business, the company, the organisation was doing at the time, what you were doing at the time, the methods, the approaches, and again that may be tool techniques, but it also can be approaches to in-person interaction, the analysis of the results, and often again where you're looking at results, it's also your own personal results. It's also a reflection on more qualitative elements of that period in time. And often people, if you're looking quite far back, you don't necessarily have access to the explicit results, the graphs, the data that popped out at that time. And then, of course, the conclusions and more critically, sustainability elements are a good round off. And what we've added since within the last few years are 3 explicit questions which get you to bring together your ideas about that body of work. And but by and large, it's a fairly straightforward template and structure you need to put together. Within all this, you'll be developing drafts, second drafts, final drafts, and throwing them by your assessor, your mentor, to get feedback, by which you might get areas that they think good areas to develop, thoughts for the future, perhaps thoughts for the subsequent pieces of work, subsequent case studies, or indeed the assignment that you might want to hold and work on. We've just to make note of that, so I mentioned the 3rd case study could be a future element. We developed a package where we called it the payback option, if you like. You could, if it was deemed necessary, or if you felt it was important, use the 3rd case study as a payback case, something that's still in early stages, but you use the structure of that case to develop your argument and turn it into something concrete. As yet, nobody's actually gone through that, but we did develop that as a package for a particular customer as a possibility. It gives them, if the company or the organisation are paying for this program, then they might want some sort of, let's call it payback. And I'll leave that with you. It's essentially, it changes the sequence of events because the project is not even live. It might be still quite early on, but it gives a candidate another opportunity to use this to their advantage, this process to their advantage. You'll be able to see this reference material. These slides very much form a reference pack, if you like. So we'll send these out as soon as possible to you, so you can go back and look through them. So once those case studies are finished, and this could be this often is quite the bulk of the process, actually. Could take a good few months. If we were to put a percentage on time, arguably probably 70-75% of the time that you spend is probably on putting these 3 case studies together. We move on to the assignment, which, as I mentioned, is kind of more of an academic piece, but again, we're not treating it as an academic paper. It's not in the 3rd person, it's very much in the 1st person. It's about looking back at your own experiences, your own thoughts, your own themes, your own bugbears, maybe your own hypotheses, as in the context of the wider improvement community and development of improvement. And it takes the form essentially of a 4,000 words essay, assignment, words, pictures, supporting material as you see it as appropriate. It's also an opportunity to assess, in addition to the case material, your depth and maturity and understanding of the field, within the field. But more importantly, I think, and again, something that's emerged, it gives you an opportunity to develop your personal perspective on improvement, on lean improvement in the context of where you are at the moment. To that end, it mixes a bit of reading and research with your own, coalescing your own thoughts, some of which will be informed, a lot of which, in fact, are often informed by the case material that you put together. So you can treat those case studies and the critical reflections of those case studies as an opportunity to develop your thoughts for the assignment itself. And just a sort of a reminder, the title typically relates to the evolution and development of lean thinking over the last 30 or so years, maybe or beyond. And then gives you an opportunity to discuss a theme or topic or hypothesis of interest that you might want to develop further, either for yourself or within the organisation. And again, it's another opportunity for you to sort of develop crystallised thoughts, perhaps, that you might want to then subsequently showcase to people within the organisation. And a number of candidates are doing that at the moment. So once we sign that off, and we're happy that you're able to move on, we round it all off with a panel presentation. And this is very much the if you like, the last 5% of work that's involved. You bring, by bringing a presentation together, essentially you're bringing together the other elements of the programme, but also perhaps looking towards the future. And again, a number of candidates in the past have used this as an opportunity to showcase to their other people within the organisation, perhaps other practitioners, or indeed more senior people, in a sense showcasing their own work, but also where their vision is. And again, this very much depends on the context within which you're sitting at the moment, and where we feel you want to go to. So if you think of, if you like, the case studies as past, the assignment as past, present, and a bit of future, and the panel presentation is sort of looking towards the future. That rounds off the whole programme, and is typically an hour and a half. It's very much your show, so you can decide who's going to be there. So you might want to invite some of your organisational representatives. We might want us to go away and invite other practitioners for some reflection on your development. And we don't do anything more than an hour and a half. It can be a physical meeting. We've had many meetings at customers, at candidates' facilities, or with us in Cardiff, or we can meet online where constraints have been based on usually geographical constraints, and obviously with the pandemic, that's also necessitated more online meetings. And once that's done, you're awarded with a certificate. This is actually a group. This picture here is a group within one organisation. It can be quite a powerful process. If there's a number, at least a couple of you within the same organisation, if you want to go through this process, you add another dimension of reflection and self-learning when you've got somebody else going through the same sort of process, because you can talk to each other and sort of develop your thoughts a little bit more critically. Or more typically, and this is the picture down here is an example of somebody going through consultant-led level 3 process. I've mentioned critical reflection a lot. Many of you, I'm sure, have done this for your own purposes or within your role. And I also mentioned that there were 3 explicit questions on the case studies, and they are they're primarily to develop your thoughts and give insight for your assignment project. So one would be, how did the case experience impact on your approach to leadership? So I talk more about leadership rather than the technical stuff. How did the case experience impact on the way you apply lean thinking? So that's more the technical stuff. What did you learn? What did you then subsequently apply? And then perhaps the last one is aiming to look at the wider world and your understanding of the improvement within the wider context. And again, essentially there are a few paragraphs at the end of the case studies, but they're quite a useful exercise. And again, when we feel a critical thinking, I won't dwell on this, but they're quite a useful prompt. Again, this is in the slide pack, so you can refer back to this as you see fit. As an open question, really, again, how often does one critically reflect after a piece of work? Maybe more critically after a piece of work. There might in fact be explicit surveys, or you might do an internal review. And again, you might do that within a larger program. It might take a few months, a few years. And maybe you do that as well at the end of a job, or at least it might prompt you to move on to another role. But a lot of this critical reflection is explicitly put together within the body of the program. Okay, so that's essentially explained the contents and some of the rationale behind the contents within the program. You'd be supported during that process. It's got one-to-one support, guidance, bounce off ideas, any gripes, concerns, just thrown at us, and we'll respond immediately. You've got, as we've spotted earlier, there's a few templates, there'll be guides, there'll be reading lists of articles. We tend to use, well, we do use, currently use Google Drive as our, if you like, our platform for developing the processes. But we're become even more aware, actually, of IT security issues which prevent people from doing that. So you've got that option, but if it does not working for you, then we work around it and we work to whatever is appropriate in your IT context. And of course, the contact will be web-based, face-to-face. If you want us to visit your site, your organisation, or indeed through some networking events as well, which we've kind of took a back seat, not surprisingly, during the pandemic, but we're starting to get to grips with the game more in live sessions as well. So I come back to that networking. Actually, most recently, we actually got as many as the level 3 candidates together as possible to discuss both the program but also their own personal views. So that proved quite a powerful session. So just a quick look at some of the candidates that have gone through this so far. So right across sectors, in fact, from the private sectors, large manufacturing organisations, quite early on, in fact. Those within the energy sector, and that you would send pictures of those, that large European corporate, actually based in Germany, with their own sort of academy, their own centre of excellence, which is quite an interesting output from that. Consultants, either individual or sitting within a larger consultancy organisation with diverse, broad experience, or often sometimes consultants or people within organisations have dipped in and out of this consultancy, and we reflect that as part of their portfolio. Or indeed at the other end of that spectrum, like long-serving practitioners sitting within the same company, and that's actually proved to be very, very interesting, because you get that depth of knowledge about the organisation itself and the people within the organisation and the behaviours within it, which people who've gone from job to job or different organisations to organisations perhaps don't get to that level of understanding. So there's a lot to be said for breadth and depth, or breadth or depth in your portfolio. And also within public services, we've had those in health and social care systems, large governmental departments, public broadcasting, mainly BBC, and also third sector emergency services. So again, quite a range of experiences and contexts within which you can tell your story or apply your current knowledge. And most recently, the current candidates include a number of people actually sitting within quite a large reprocessing organisation. So that's kind of developing a little bit of a sort of centre of excellence at this level. A number of consultants working in, always seem to come across the banking sector, but have had experience in other areas. Another leader within the energy sector, he's sitting in Germany at the moment. And a couple of people I mentioned who are sort of gone through together, sitting within a large international tool and equipment supplier. And they're kind of using this process actually as an opportunity to develop their strategy, because they're now at that level where they're becoming the people who are developing this, at the very least, the CI strategy, but also have the ear of the CEO. So it's proving quite a useful exercise at this particular time for them. Another number of consultants, those sitting within the rail industry. I know there's some very interesting stories from there. And another couple of consultants, both in the UK and within the Netherlands. It's quite a nice group at the moment, quite a nice large group going through at this particular stage. There's a few comments from past candidates. I think worthwhile, it's more qualitative output in many respects. Worthwhile, interesting process. There's a lot of personal lessons being learned. And that's also reflecting my more recent candidate thoughts. Again, very similar. The case studies themselves proved quite a very powerful mechanism for some for reviewing their personal development. It's given them the excuse, permission, if you like, to reflect, and if necessary, readjust the way in which they do things. And actually, one of them did reflect, say, actually, this is the concept of hindsight, and say the self-reflection in the, sort of the Japanese dictionary. The act of simply getting things down, getting your thoughts down on paper, getting it out of your head and onto paper is actually proved very powerful for some as well. Getting that narrative down, and not in a narrative style rather than bullet points. And as I say, we've started developing more group sessions, and that's also proved useful for people where they can bounce ideas off similarly leveled practitioners. I mentioned that networking community. We've also got the opportunity beyond this program for you to look at areas for research, present some papers, present some thought pieces. Many of you will come across our sort of developing CPD program. And we've had a number of, if you like, internally published thought leadership articles, which sometimes have been based on that final piece of work, sometimes have been sparked by the thoughts that have been developed through the program. I've got a couple of examples there. You'll see those on the website. We'll look at those in any detail. So just to finish off then, what's the process for applying? You can contact us directly. You can go through the website, but also if you want to have just a discussion, contact me or Simon. Probably I'm the best person to contact directly if you're thinking of moving ahead and want to discuss things in detail. And there are a number of accredited consultants who can also take you through the process. That's really essentially just a reminder of what we saw earlier. These are not explicit. They're not going to tell you you're not allowed to join if you haven't got these, but certainly this is not untypical of the candidate profile that's come through. And that online application, the application process starts by creating that lean CV, as I mentioned. That's essentially the application. Making time for yourself, making sure you've got enough time to be to start the process, start thinking about timetabling it. The fee itself, and if you've looked at this online, is from £3,400 plus VAT, but there are a number of discounts available as well for organisations that are accredited or sitting in public services or in public education. So it's worth having a chat, probably with Simon on this if you're looking for discounts from that fee. And then the thinking about your starting date. So if you're taking an individual route, it's you can start anytime. It's very much down to you. If you want to go in with a cohort, then we can put together a specific time where everybody starts together. Again, you can imagine a cohort that's within an organisation. So again, that probably more down to you rather than us. But if we're bringing people together from different organisations, then we need to get that timing right so there's more organisation involved. But there's some powerful additional outcomes from having working with a cohort. There's an element of peer review. It builds momentum. You can see other people moving ahead. It gives you an excuse to sort of move on as well. Okay, so in summary, the Level 3 program or Level 3 certification is an independent endorsement of where you've got to. It's an experiential certification, so it doesn't require you to go away and do courses unless you want to. It gives you an opportunity to showcase your credibility, give credibility to the outside world as a senior lean thinker, lean leader, improvement specialist, improvement leader and specialist. As I've said, that reflective element has emerged during the process and it's proved very powerful, and it's very much part of looking perhaps to the future where you might want to develop yourself or develop your department or develop your organisation for the future. And it gives you a platform from which you can launch that further and an excuse to in many respects. And that's our one-page summary of the components as we've gone through today. So I suppose really just to finish off on that on here, it's more than a sum of its parts, if you like. It compels you to look at your own development and assess to a degree the effectiveness, but also your own personal view, your own personal style. You can tell it in a story. It gives you permission to tell that story in a structured way, but very much in your own style. There's an opportunity for you to promote yourself or to promote what you're doing or the department. Indeed, coalesce thoughts and ideas within an organisation, perhaps. And through the assignment, arguably, it also gives an opportunity to place your experiences in the context of wider improvement and lean development. And that's our whistle-stop tour of the Level 3 programme today. If there are any thoughts or questions, we can discuss them now. Or, as I said, by all means, if you want to go away and have a think about it, get back to me by email or via the website, and we can discuss the way you might want to take it forward, or just your thoughts around what's appropriate when, so that you can make a decision should you need to. So for now, is there any burning questions that any of you have that might want to use? Tammy, any thoughts?
Thanks, John. Really interesting to have a look at that. I was having a look at it for colleagues at Southampton Uni, for thinking about how we're going to link this to our lean leaders offering. So been really helpful to have a look at that. Thank you. I'd really value a chat offline actually to talk about your mentoring and coaching approach, as we're using a similar approach for our lean practitioner course, and maybe we could share some ideas.
Absolutely, drop me a mail.
Brilliant, thanks, John.
Time range of time for that.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
But say, if you're looking at it for colleagues or within an organisation, use it to the organisation's advantage as well. And there's a whole different level of opportunity there that perhaps the individual can't realise, and the individual going through the process can't realise. So
Yeah.
it can be very powerful.
Definitely. Is this matched to a sort of a level 7 apprenticeship?
No, because actually I'm wary of comparing it with other more formal schemes. In the sense, we are because it's experience. You're looking back at things. You're showcasing the case for where you are now. So I'd be wary about comparing it with other levels. So I shall say no, not necessarily at the moment, but because there'll be things that this has that other levels don't have. But again, perhaps this is something we can talk about. Perhaps this is something we can.
So I was just
wondering, it's not really something I've looked at specifically.
Okay.
We have looked at that level 7, and sometimes there are things that are quite concrete, and you think actually no, that's not
a bit nebulous.
This is like the LCS. This is very much context driven. This is about what's appropriate for either the individual or the organisation, and trying to create a framework that means something to the organisation, rather than necessarily impose constraints and restrictions. But again, there's bound to be lots of crossover and gaps in both approaches in this respect.
Can I just ask?
Let's have a further discussion about that, because I can't really
Great.
sort of add anything really at this stage.
So one other question I had, John, was do Cardiff still do the MSc in Lean, or is that
they're operational management? So it's obviously not run. The Lean Enterprise Research Centre doesn't exist as such, but it does. But it's essentially a business school which run that element. So you've got Sarah and the crew sort of running that end of things. So
okay.
But if you're interested, again, have another discussion. I can
just interested to know if it's still around. Great stuff. Thanks a lot, John.
Okay, no problem. So if that's everything for today, I'll still call off. Kevin, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, John, thank you very much for that. Just looking at time-wise, I represent Turner & Townsend Sweco consultancy. We are something like 30 consultants within the Sweco part, working with various clients across MOD, industry, utilities, etc. If we were going to take all our consultants through this at the moment, because obviously we're certified anyway to deliver up to level 2. If we took our consultants through, I'm just looking at the time to actually do this for the individual, because you're saying it's 9 to 12 months. How much individual time would it actually take per person to go through this?
Well, how long is a piece of string? Essentially, if you look at the pieces of work, and if I'm more specific about the case studies, for example, because they do take the bulk of time, and partly, by and large, because people have other stuff to do. If you look at the individual pieces of work, so the case studies are not untypically 10 to 20 pages long, let's call it. I'm not going to put word limits on it because there's lots of content in there which might not count as words as such. And there's a lot of toing and froing and finessing and feedback involved in that. So there's a process for each case study, which I can't see an individual being able to spend any more time than let's say a month on each case study, and that's probably cases 2 and 3. Case 1 will definitely take longer because it's about developing that style. Similarly, you have to if you really want to get it done quickly, you have to be really ready to go on the assignment. And nobody's managed to do that so far, simply because you are doing what you're doing. You're busy doing other stuff, and it's a lot of the commitment. And I perhaps didn't dwell on this, but by and large, the time commitment is very much personal. It's sitting at home perhaps on your spare day, or I mean, if you as an organisation give time for personal development, then that's very useful, and we have a couple of organisations which do that, so that's proved a lot more useful. They can say, well, that day I'm definitely working on it, but for others, it's often that they have to work at the weekends, and then personal commitments get in the way. So in terms of the amount of work, it's possibly not huge, but being able to sit down and build momentum up in order to do it is usually where the challenge is. So if you've got a large, fairly reasonable number of consultants who you think are at this or thereabouts, this level, particularly within one organisation, there are advantages. I mentioned a couple of them. In the sense you can build momentum by having a number of people going through at the same time, because they can see that others are getting on, and then that encourages them to get on with a piece of work, and you build that sort of peer pressure to a certain extent. That helps. It also gives an opportunity to talk to each other and sort of compare notes. So there are advantages there. I can see that within an organisation such as yours, where people might be able to get together and push things on, build that momentum. But as I say, I don't think we've come to any situation where it doesn't. I don't think anybody's completed in less than 6-7 months.
Okay.
Simply because of the level they are, simply because of the demands on them, both professionally and personally, and the commitment, the momentum that you have to build to get these pieces of work done.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a roundabout answer, but you see what I mean. It's from our own experience. Nobody's been able to get it done in the time. If they've thought that they could get it done in a couple of months, it's usually proves the opposite.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, John.
Okay. And again, by all means, we can have a much more deeper discussion if you want to look at this further and think about the corporate position as well.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, if that's enough for now. So by all means, get hold of me. We can have another discussion if it's for you personally or from the group, and you can get hold of me at that email address, or if you want to discuss probably more the financial stuff, just have a little discussion with Simon Elias